with Mr. Mitchell Mack at his home. Today is November the 30th, 2005. And we thank you, Mr. Mack, for allowing us to come and interview you for our oral history project for the Mooresville Museum.
Mitchell, what can you tell us about your memories of your grandfather and when he came to this country from Lebanon?
Well, of course, it's all memory because my grandfather was living with us when I was a child and growing up and so forth. But my grandfather left Lebanon in 1903, right at the turn of the century, because he felt like there was a better way. There was so much turmoil and strife, always had been in that part of the world, as we all know, through all the various empires, the Ottoman empires and everything. So he was in touch with a fellow in the States that lived in Marion, South Carolina. And through some communication, he got word to my grandfather that he really ought to come to this country, that it was what it's all cracked up to be, and it was just great. So, I mean, he had to rumble around his head, and so he finally one day, you know, with having 5 children, a wife, 5 children, left alone, could not speak a word of English, came to the United States. Now, it had to be a long boat trip here. He comes through Ellis Island, of course, and going through the ranks and so forth for admittance. But of course, they asked him his name. He said, "My name is Hanna Mahu Fahuri." Well, they knew that Hanna was John. Mahu kind of flippant, so they wrote an M-A-C-K and stopped there. Didn't even fool with the Fahuri. Didn't even fool with that. So anyway, that's how we got named. So he had some notes there to give the folks where he was going to go and so forth. And of course, he gave the station agent at Penn Station the instruction you want to go to Marion, South Carolina. Now, what happened to the South Carolina, I'm not sure, but he was sent to Marion, North Carolina. So when he arrives in Marion, North Carolina, he's sitting there at the station agent. I believe it was on a Saturday. But anyway, he waits all afternoon, all night, and then about close to midnight when the station agent was getting ready to close up, he felt real sorry for him because his friend hadn't come to pick him up. So he takes him home with him, beds him, gives him breakfast the next morning, and puts him on a train to Charlotte to a person by the name of F.A. Joseph, who he knew was Lebanese. So he winds up in Charlotte and finally gets a hold of F.A. Joseph, and he starts, his activity there, gets a place to, I don't know whether they bedded him or what they did. Now he finally got him a place to stay, and he liked the area. And of course, we never know whether he would get to Marion, South Carolina or not. But he liked Charlotte. He went to work there. He went to a wholesale William & Shelton company was in business then, and there's another place where he bought his wares and so forth. And he bought him some valise packs, these telescope packs, and he started traveling on foot, door to door, selling his wares. And a lot of that was done in those days. I mean, that's the way he traveled. The wholesalers were called drummonds, coming from store to store and that kind of thing. Well, he liked the area, and he stayed there, and he finally, one day he was at the post office and overheard a couple Lebanese fellows that had just come in from Lebanon talking about it, and so he asked him something about his family and so forth, what he knew, and then around about 5 he heard that one of the boys hurt their foot or something. I don't know whether they broke their leg or what happened, but it concerned him. And so that's when he decided he was going to go back and bring his family over. He'd been meaning to do it anyway, but he said, so he takes back what he can to the wholesalers and gives away or sells what he's got, and he goes back to Lebanon. This is in 1907, I believe. While he's there, the 6th child is born. And while that was Bahia. Now, while she was very small and everything, he couldn't wait to come back to America. Well, his wife did not feel comfortable coming to a strange land without a place to go to. So she asked him to go ahead and get established and send them their tickets and so forth, and they would come over. So when he came back, he brought the oldest daughter, Nora, and the second son, Charles, with him. My father was the oldest, Sid was the oldest, so he stayed with the family. They came back with Uncle Charlie. They came back to this country. And then they hadn't been here very long when the grandmother didn't like the split family and wrote him. I don't know how they wrote, whether cable or how they, but sent word that she just wasn't happy with the split family. They liked she's ready to come. So I don't know whether it was a month getting the message. I don't know, but anyway, he writes her to get ready, and he's going to send Charlie back over to bring the girls over, knowing that my daddy would come by himself, you know, ahead of time. And I don't know how he thought that, but then he sent Charlie back. So that's what he did. But in the meantime, she fell. Their house was on the side of a hill, and they dried their wheat and everything on the top of the house. And she must have made some cue or something, and she fell, not a real long fall, but she broke her neck in the fall. And she didn't survive. She didn't make it over here. So Uncle Charlie went back, got the girls and everything ready, but then he spent over a year there before he came back, and he found his bride. He married Frida Seth, and brought her back with him, along with Lucille, Sophie, and Bahia, the girls. Now my father met up with two friends there, Nora Norman's father, Charlie Norman, who lived in Winsboro, South Carolina, with Waddy Francis, whose family wound up in Great Falls, South Carolina. The three of those guys came, and they were to meet in Alexandria, Egypt. Some way they got mixed up, and they wound up on the same boat, but they got mixed up, and so they go take a boat over to La Havre, France, and take a train across the country up to the port. I mean to Marseille, up to the port of La Havre, and they came by boat to New York. They got a train to New York to Charlotte. So when they got to Charlotte, my father was sitting around. They were talking, and this F.A. Joseph happened to pass by and hear them talking. They recognized the language, and they said that they were looking for Said Mack, and Said. It was Said was the name. So they said he had moved to Mooresville. Anyway, Dad picked up some information that he had moved to Mooresville, and they corrected us. No, they're back in Charlotte. That he has moved back to Charlotte. So I'll take you around to where he lives. So F.A. Joseph takes him around to whatever street he was staying on, and knocked on the door. It was late at night. Knocked on the door. Who is it? Says, he told me, F.A. said, I got your son out here. And I remember the comment was made, he had been known to do a lot of drinking. So, well, you going home to your family, you need to go home. So anyway, he came to the door, and he opened the door, and there it was. So that was a cheerful reunion for them. Then, at that time, they were living in Charlotte, and he had opened up a store. So Nora was minding the store while he went out during the day selling, you know. So then they all became part of that business there. Now he was walking through all the countryside and so forth. They would walk with those packs on their back to Concord, to Kannapolis, to Mooresville, to Statesville, to Coolidge, to Salisbury. They covered this whole place on foot. And of course, they finally, after they opened the store in Mooresville, decided they'd go to store, but they wanted to move to, so they liked Mooresville, so they decided to come to Mooresville. And they bargained with Zeb Turley and Ed Deaton to build that store building for them in between the two. And this was sometime during the year 1912, first part of the year. And they told him they would pay them double rent. I think he wanted $35 a month rent. They offered him double rent if they got open for him by December, by Christmas time, December the 1st. In the meantime, they came aboard and they opened a store up on the corner of Moore and North Main. And that had to be the building that I recall that was a post office at one time. It became a post office after they were there. Then it became Kelly Clothing Company. And then it became, of course, Harding Rogers Furniture Store. When you said, I forget now what name. People's Furniture. So it became that. That's where they opened up until the store was ready. So it wasn't ready for December the 1st. They finished it all but hanging the doors. They moved in on Christmas Eve, 1912. They hung the doors the day they moved in.
What about the merchandise?
Well, so they had merchandise there. Yeah, they probably had enough of it there because they did a big business Christmas Eve. I mean, they opened at 12 o'clock back in those days on Saturdays. So that started, and then when they did that, they moved upstairs. Now the building they were in, when they lived up there was a stairway that went up the back of that building. And if you ever notice the back of that building, there's a whole window section there. That was the doorway into that place. So they lived upstairs over the store for the first number of years and so forth.
Was it always of both men and women's clothing?
When they opened, it was general merchandise. You know, when they peddled, they carried women's skirts, blouses, lingerie. They carried piece goods. They carried notions, scissors, threads, needles, all that kind of stuff for sewing, and men's shirts and work pants, that kind of thing. And then they carried a couple $100 pounds of stuff around those releases.
Where did they stay? Now, surely they could not walk in one day.
Well, that was why they got to Moore. But I forgot to tell you about that. See, when nighttime came, they would bargain for the room and board wherever they were. They stayed with the Tom Mars, they stayed with the Oswalds, they stayed with the Sloops, all these families, and Bear Poplar, all these locations around. I need to go get something to. Can you stop this just a minute? Let me go get something.
Okay.
All right, now where they spent the night with these folks, and of course they picked out favorites over a period of time where they always worked to try to get to at nighttime. Anyway, the Jim Houston's family and the Winecoffs in the Bear Poplar area. Pink Leffler, Jim Light, the Sloops and Chow Collier in Rowan County. Jack Deal in the area of 152 and 153 Junction, which is out just 3 miles north of Moore, I guess. 152. No, that would be out.
Where the drive-in theater used to be.
Well, that's 150 and 52 split off. 52 and 53 is where the road that goes to China goes splits the road going to Atlantis.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 10 miles out. Let's see, and then we got Jack Deal in the area 152 and 53. Sherwood Houston at Oswald. The Beavers near the Rowan-Ireland line. The Templetons, Tom Mara, Ed Owens, and the Burks, all of the Amity community. The Hoovers between Oswald and Amity Hill. A Rogers family out from Troutman on the Catawba River. Turner Oswald and the Sexes at East Monbo. Will Troutman near Long Island. And they really enjoyed getting to know these people. The Tom Mars became my granddaddy's favorite. That's the family that father of Fred and Jim Mack. And Jim Mack told me one day that that's where he got his name. He was named Mack after my granddaddy.
Oh.
So anyway, that's why the Macks never drove anything but a Chevrolet automobile. They were so close. But they really did establish some good ties. Oh, now where were we?
Well, let's go on forward a little bit.
All right.
What about Merchants Association in Mooresville? Was there a strong Merchants Association, or was there no?
Well, at first there was no Merchants Association, but some way the good rapport got, because they always worked with each other. They gave each other 10% discounts and that kind of thing, I recall. I'm not sure when the Merchants Association was first organized, but I believe the real official, well, they had one, but it wasn't active. But you know, after I came back out of service in the early 40s or mid 40s, we had a big office open then with the credit bureau. I think the first person was a lady that lived here from Durham, and then after that was Rosalie Bryan, Rose's mother. Irene Bryan was our, and she was there a long time, and she was replaced by Helen Duffy. So, and then that went on until these credit bureaus got to be so big that if you didn't belong to one, and they consolidated so that they didn't recognize the smaller places. It got to where for Helen Duffy to get her credit for some folks, she had to go through the bureau in Statesville and pay them a fee, that kind of thing. So that eventually just, when we had to close the credit bureau because it couldn't earn any more money, that's what kept the office really going. I mean, the merchants paid a very small token fee, but the credit bureau is where the money was made to operate that office. Then it was made a division of the Chamber of Commerce, Merchants Division, and that's how it's operated since until 12 years ago. The Downtown Commission was established. You know, we started the Main Street program, which was a good thing. We got part of that, and that's when we got the formal downtown set up. We have we even voted to tax ourselves to finance the operation of the Downtown Commission.
Now, your family belonged to the First Presbyterian Church.
Correct.
But Mr. Charles's family went to the Catholic Church. Is that right?
Well, let's back up. Back in those days, there was no Catholic Church here. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Sam Hay at the Presbyterian Church did some missionary work. He talked my daddy into church is better than no church. So they started going to the Presbyterian Church. The Charles Mack family went to the Presbyterian Church. Their oldest son, Theodore, Philip, they were all active in the Presbyterian Church. They still are. All of Philip's children are still active. Linda Robinson is one of them. Mm-hmm. They're all still active in the church. When Aunt Frida died in 1933, Lewis was two and a half years old. And then several years later, he was remarried. In the meantime, my Aunt Lucille, Miss Joe Eichel, fed his family. Well, she only had one son then. They had lost their second son of scarlet fever when he was 2 or 3 years old. And then when he remarried, he married a person whose family grew up in a close, the town of Azure, which was close to Rome in Lebanon, where my parents grew, where my father grew up. My mother grew up in Judea, which is on the main highway from Beirut to Damascus. But anyway, through a friend in South Carolina, he met Aunt Alice. Aunt Alice, she was Alice Azuri, and she lived in Cuba. They went to Cuba to visit her. And the second trip down, he brought her back. So they were married, and she wanted to start a Catholic church. There was a small activity here. Mrs. Van Hoy, who lived on Church Street, was holding mass in her house, 2 or 3 people, that's all. So she joined them and so forth, and next thing you know, I now says, Charlie, let's just go ahead and start the Catholic Church. And they really started the church. And of course, Lewis went to the Catholic Church. George went to the Presbyterian Church. Of course, he died in an early age. George was in World War II. He was a tail gunner on a B-24 bomber. plane. Their original crew of 11, they were shot down 11 times, and George was the only survivor of that original crew that came back alive. But George died in 1956 on leap year day of leukemia.
Could you, Mitchell, list the children, because I get confused over whose children, I mean, which family
my
you all belong
family,
to. Okay, this is Side Mack.
Charles Mack. And my mother, I mean, there's a tie going back to F.A. Joseph here again. My mother was the grandniece of F.A. Joseph in Charlotte. And he introduced my father to her. And while they were courting, you know, I'm talking about Senator Pink Leffer's house, my mother stayed at the Leffer's house while they courted out at Bear Poplar until they were married. They were married on Easter Sunday, 1913, and that's the earliest Easter will ever fall. It was March 23rd. And that's the only time it's ever been, and it'll never be that way again, I have to understand, but they were married Easter Sunday, 1913. All right, let's go back to the question. Charlotte and my mother had Edward Mack, had Madeline Mack as the oldest child. And then Edward Mack was the second child. Margaret Mack was the third child, and I was the fourth child in that family. Uncle Charlie had a son, Theodore, became a physician, lived in Richmond. Philip, who married Catherine Lowry. George, who died in 1956. Louis, who just died recently. And then by his second marriage, he had Frankie Mack and Johnny Mack. Those two. He had 6 boys. He also had a girl between Philip and George. No, between George and Louis. He had a girl. I can just barely remember them bathing her. She was in a pail, and she died with scarlet fever. That's the only girl they ever had, and she died with scarlet fever.
You mentioned a Margaret Mack.
Yeah.
But you didn't say Madeline.
Madeline was the first one. She's the oldest one in our family.
Oh, the oldest in your family.
Yeah, Madeline
okay.
Mack. So,
Okay.
and she is now a resident of Wellspring in Greensboro. She's in the, what do you call it, skilled care. I mean, I had a 2-hour visit with her this past Friday, and I mean, she carries on almost no conversation, just lost all interest in everything. I mean, she smiles, laughs a lot, but you can't really carry on a conversation with her. Okay, and Madeline and I are the only survivors right now in our family. And of the Charles Mack family, only Frankie and Johnny are the survivors now.
How did it come about that your part of the family had a retail business, and the Charles Mack family became wholesalers?
Well, Charles Mack was in the business originally, but he opened a shoe store. You remember Gene Feek's jewelry store? Mm-hmm. That location there is where Uncle Charlie's shoe store was. Mm-hmm. And then, after that, I mean, he moved around a lot. After that, he partnered with Joe Eichel in Mack and Eichel. And they had a candy kitchen and a grocery store up on Main Street, about what is now the Wedding Chapel building, or the Cycle Shop. One of those buildings right in there is where Mack and Eichel was. And they had the most gorgeous candy operation that you ever saw. They had 2 large granite top tables back there, and they had these huge round copper kettles with rounded bottoms, and they set those things on top of this heater they had. They fed wood into it, and they cooked all this stuff. And they'd pour it out on these tops to cool them off. Like the coconut candy, they'd pour out the chocolate, and it cooled. They'd pour out the vanilla on top of that, and it cooled. They'd pour out the cherry on top of that, and it sliced up, had this ribbon of coconut candy. They made the most scrumptious peanut butter brittle you can imagine. Coconut brittle. They made a peanut cream candy. They made nougats, salted peanuts, all kinds of stuff. And they had Hershey chocolate, and these real slabs were about this wide and about this long and about this thick. And they just chip it off, if you wanted to buy it. And back then, you get enough of candy for a nickel to get sick off of. But yeah, I often wonder what happened to those tables and those gorgeous copper kettles. Nobody in the family knows what's happened to them. And by the way, when the creamery was in existence, it was on the corner there next to the ice cream plant. The ice cream plant owns that whole corner now. But back then, that was more of a creamery. That was a big operation. They delivered milk home. They had buttermilk all the time, and they served the grocery stores. I know we used to go out and people get a gallon of buttermilk about every week and that kind of thing. Well, the production started getting big, and so B.A. Troutman and some of the business people in town, and it included Charles Mack and Joe Eichel, because they knew how to make the ice cream. They started the Deluxe Ice Cream Company. And then after they got going, they brought R.C. Millsaps down from Statesville to operate it. But Joe Eichel and Charles Mack are the ones that developed Deluxe Ice Cream. That's not generally known, but I think the Millsaps talk about it now. They say, and so eventually over a period of time, the Millsaps bought the business. But and then my Uncle Charlie wanted to also go in the wholesale business, and Joe Eichel did not want to, so that's when they split. He opened a restaurant, City Cafe, up about where Irene Bryan's, the Bible bookstore is, right in there. Y'all remember City Cafe?
Mm-hmm, I do.
Okay, the original City Cafe, that's where Joe Eichel was. And then he opened a bowling alley in what is now where CVS was, in the old Troutman shirt building, and a bowling shop, a bowling alley, and a pool room. He had that. And then he built that one up on the north end of town out on Salisbury Drive. That building sits out there, and it looks awful. He has a grandson, the only survivor in that whole family, and he lets it go to pot. But anyway, that's real interesting. And then so Uncle Charlie opened up in the Troutman and a building up on North Main Street. And the reason I remember that so well, because I was in about the 7th or 8th grade, and Martha Nez, a classmate of mine, used to go by there every afternoon and make peanut butter sandwiches, and they'd package them like the Lance things. Well, Charles Mack and them did that and packaged them himself and sold them on their routes and so forth back in the early days. And how Martha got that job is Floyd Kelly out of Troutman. Her first job was with Charles Mack and Son. So, and then after she was there a while, and then the building that became the Charles Mack Glass building, by the way, that John is given to the town for the museum, was built by Barger Brothers. That was the furniture building there. And now why they built that building on the lot and no back entrance or anything, but that's where Barger Brothers was. And when they moved up on North Main Street, where they eventually spread out, my daddy taught Uncle Charlie into buying that building. So that's how they got that building. And it's a well-built building. It's got steel in and everything, so it'll be good. It'll serve. Of course, we've got to redo the inside, make it handicap accessible and all that kind of thing. But did I answer your question?
Yes. Thank you. Let's talk about Boy Scouts a little bit.
Oh, goodness. All right. I joined Scouts in December 1932, and the reason I did because my brother was in Scouts, and my daddy was interested in Scouts, and so I remember my first year in, went to Scout camp at what became Shield Scout Reservation. It was Piedmont Boy Scout camp then, and my daddy was very active. He was on the early executive board. I can remember when Piedmont Council was formed. There was a fellow in Statesville by the name of Clyde Alexander, and he tried to get the powers to be together so they could form a council and let him be the Scout executive. For some reason, I don't know, the people that were active there didn't like that idea, so they said they wanted to join Mr. Bud Shield, who was organizing this Piedmont Council. And so that's how we got into Piedmont Council at that time. So in the early days, Judge Capps was the first, and my dad was one of the first executive board members, and he was very active in Scout. he established the first colored troop in this town, which was out on West End. He taught the mill company and sponsored a Boy Scout troop. There were 3 troops in town. The Lutheran Church had a troop, the Rotary Club sponsored a troop, and the Kiwanis Club sponsored a troop. I remember that those units got on pretty good, but probably the best troop in town because the preacher Phillips was also the scoutmaster, and they were at the old Lutheran Church up on North Main Street where the fire station is now. Then the Kiwanis Club, Mr. Price Sherrill was a Kiwanian, and they used to sponsor these carnivals. And these carnivals had these sideshows and everything that draw a lot of folks in. And they made a lot of money on those things. And they built a scout hut down on Moore Avenue below Central Methodist Church. That house is still there, but I noticed the chimney's been changed because in brick BSA was on the front of that. And that became such a popular troop that everybody wanted to be in that troop, you know. And it got to be so big that right after the war, that troop was split up. Part of it went to the Methodist Church, part of it went to the ARP Church, part of it went to the Presbyterian Church. I guess those 3 went to the Presbyterian Church. The Lutheran Church already had a troop. I mean, they had a troop. So the Presbyterian picked up part of it, the Methodist Church picked up part of it, and the ARP picked it up. So, and that continued for a while. And my daddy talked Mr. Charlie Gunner and the folks at Morville Mills. You know, they were having so much trouble with vandalism in the mill houses, windows being knocked out and everything. He told them if they would start a scout troop down there that he thought they could do something about it. So they built a hut back to the building. That building's still there. It was Christian Mission, they outgrew it. That building's still there. And after they started that troop down at the mill, the vandalism just reduced immeasurably. So they kept it for a long time, but when the personnel changed down there, you know, if you don't have a good scoutman, it kind of waned. My daddy taught the Broad Street Methodist Church into picking that troop up. And that troop had Joe Hornbuckle became the scoutmaster, and it was a good troop for a long time. Ray Howard, there were a bunch of people who were in that troop. So we had that troop active. The ARP troop was good. The Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church, and the Methodist Church. And Scouts found then that the churches were better sponsors than civic clubs because you had better continuity of responsibility, and they were run better.
Well, what about the black troop? Did it ever...
The black troop, in and out, up and down. We had a separate council executive looked after the black troop. I mean, it survived, but it was never real thriving after initially was. And of course, then they started integrating, and of course, some troops have black guys, but somehow there are not many blacks cater to the program. I just don't. Of course, we got a lot of white boys that don't like Scouts too. And I remember that when Cubs was not in an organization when I came up. I don't know at what point. I guess the Cubs became fairly prominent during the war years. And then, of course, with our troop there, we had a Cub pack, and I believe his name is Clark Murphy was Cub master, and they had a big pack going. They had a real good pack going. And at the Presbyterian Church, Bill Norman was the scout leader there. But anyway, when I came out of service, they talked me into taking that troop over. Bill Norman wanted to get out of it, and so I took that troop over. Al was one of my scouts.
Troop 5 more.
That was the longest continually chartered troop in Iredell County until after my kids came along. I got to where I just couldn't handle it. I wasn't doing that good a job because you need a lot of adult help. So I believe Carl Neal took it over from me. And Carl had it and ran a good troop for a while. And then Preston Brawler became the scout leader. By that time, Frank Rader came along as one of the senior boys, and he did a good job working with the unit as a senior patrol leader, and he was running the troop. So Preston was just sitting back and enjoying it. So when Frank went to Davidson College, we had problems because that troop was getting no program, nothing was happening. And so we got, what's his name, lives over on, what's the name of that boy that became the scoutmaster? Had a great outdoor program. Went camping once a week, but they didn't do any advancement. No advancement at all. So something happened. He had to give it up. What's that boy's name? I can't think.
It'll come to you.
It'll come to you.
He finally got up. We got, I believe, John Neely. And Al got involved with it too, but I don't know why we just couldn't get it off the ground. And so finally, I decided, well, I've been beating my brains out here trying to keep it going, and so one can't keep leadership for it, and the church didn't care whether it was there or not. So we let it lapse, and it's a shame because that was the longest continuous charter troop. But anyway, a year or so later, Roy Hom, a guy appeared on the picture that volunteered for it. I knew that wouldn't work. I became the best troop in the whole council. Excellent. He worked for Duke Power, just excellent. And he had more adult assistants. He had 5 and 6 men there at the meetings every week. They got up, troops of 32 guys. Well, shoot, he was twice that size at one time. Well, when he had to give it up, then one of the assistants, Larry Taylor, took it over, and it ran for a while. It wasn't as good as Roy's, but he finally worked back up, and now we've got another leader there. And it's operating. The church bought that building, the dealership building, and the scouts moved in there. And of course, Larry and some of them have a real good attitude. They felt like it was their building, and they wanted to do with it what they wanted to. They spent a lot of money junking it up, fixing it up, and all that kind of thing. But it's been a little bit of a problem as far as the church is concerned, trying to get authority. Well, I think we're finally getting it back. We've been talking to them. And Eddie Nelson is chair of that committee, and Eddie has been able to move it. It's getting better now as far as the relationship with the church and so forth. The scoutmaster is not a member of our church, which that's not necessary, but it's sometimes desirable for continuity and that kind of thing. But they're doing a good job, and we got a good cut pack going.
What about the sister cities?
Betsy Lambert moved from Charlotte to the lake, and she was on the board of the Sister Cities program in Charlotte, and they had 7 different sister cities. And she just thought they ought to have one there, so she visited Dan Wallace at the chamber. She visited a whole bunch of people and so forth. And after about 6 or 8 months, somebody said, go see Mitchell Mack. I don't know why. She came and talked to me, and I said, well, it sounds like an excellent idea. I mean, I don't know. Why don't I bring this up before our international committee in the Rotary Club? And of course, I was chair of it, but Clyde Swedenberg and a couple of the guys on the committee thought it'd be a good idea. So we met with Betsy and learned a lot of stuff, and we visited one of the state meeting in Charlotte, and then we visited another meeting in Charlotte. This is a program that was started by President Eisenhower in 1956 to build up a relationship between countries that was more personal, that would do what we're trying to do in Rotary, is to get politics out of the way so that people can sit down and discuss mutual problems and work them out. Politics winds up in gridlock all the time, unfortunately. I mean, I'm just sour on politics, and I think our two-party system's got to be tweaked sometime. But anyway, back to this program. So we took on as our first year programs, our major emphasis, and we Betsy and Russ visited. We start soliciting, trying to find out countries that we could find. One of the guys in town, Peter Dolby, thought we named a town in England, so we contacted them, and for some reason they weren't interested. We got. Miss George is here.
I'm going to stop.
I think Dolores left. I think.
We got a couple in South America. We kind of wanted some country where the language wouldn't be too difficult to start with anyway. So, and then Richard Warren, that has the Pat's Coffee Shop at the time, he suggested we do Hockenheim because he was stationed in that area during the war, and that's a Formula One racing town. And he says, it's a different kind of racing, but it's still racing. So that's a common denominator. And generally, it's a driver that you have some common interest in your specialties or whatever going on. So we contacted them, and nothing happened. And then that very fall, the Gustav Schrank, the mayor of Hockenheim, contacted our chamber, wanted some help in getting some reservations and so forth in Mooresville, because they wanted to come and look at our race industry and of course attend the race that weekend. Well, that gave us a natural open. So when they came to town, Dan Wallace called Betsy, and so they had them out at Betsy's place, and then went to race together, and so they had a contact. So then Betsy and Russ went to Germany. Russ was going on a trip, and Betsy went with him, and they went to Hockenheim, and so the conversation started, the discussion started. So the next trip, Becky, Betsy and Russ, Dolores and myself, and Clyde and what's her name, Jean Swedenberg, anyway, the six of us went over. They put us up in a hotel there, which the town owns. And we spent 5 days over there, and I had never been around German folks. I didn't know what to think. All I knew about German was von Hindenburg and Hitler and people like that, and that didn't leave much of an impression for me. And I was floored at their generosity, and they just couldn't do enough for us. So I was immediately sold on it. So that's when, and then we invited them over. That's when they came over. We did the homestay, and the mayor and his wife stayed with us, and we had a delightful time. It was just great. So the next time I went over there, we did homestay, but of course Dolores and I couldn't go that trip. There was some conflict, so we couldn't go then. But anyway, then that's the time when they signed the contract over there, between the two towns. The mayor went, and then of course, when they came back the next time, Gustav and Margaret stayed with us anyway, although the mayor stayed with them over there. Dolores wanted to keep them, and Carol says fine. So, and then we had the ceremony here of the signing of the papers and everything, and so we're officially sister cities, and we're in contact. In fact, I just got an email from Gustav this week. Another good part of it is there's not a Rotary Club in Hockenheim. And when their first group came over here, our club hosted the group in their farewell dinner the night before they left. And I tell you, Kathy Sadoff and that group put on a real shebang for it. It decorated beautifully, and it was. So they were so impressed, and he said, we need to have a Rotary Club in Hockenheim. So anyway, I wrote the district governor of that district in Rotary. This was 3 years ago. And finally, this year, I get this letter from the governor over there saying that they had decided to follow up on my suggestion. And then I learned that they were organizing a club there, and then of course when they had their official opening, indoctrination, they invited all of us to go there. Of course, I couldn't go at that time, but so there, and Gustav has been made president. President, the first president of the club. So
I think another result of this has been that now German is being taught in our schools. Is that correct?
That's right. German is being taught because we have several German factories here. Weiner over across in the lakeside part they've got a huge plant over there, woodworking machine. Have you ever been in their plant? You go in there and you think you're in a hospital. All of the woodworking machine, all the shavings, they're hooked up to a vacuum and all goes out. You know, the shavings go, it sits in there, they'll tool anything you want to see, but you don't see any sawdust or shavings or anything. It's all sucked out, and that's what they do. And then of course they wanted a plant here because of the furniture industry in this area. But you know what? We're losing that. It's moving offshore too. It's just something wrong with that scenario, you know.
Well, let me back up and ask you to say a little bit more about the John Mack and Son store for people who will be seeing this and don't really know what all or how it was set up. Tell us how you and Madeline and upstairs and the scouts.
Well, it was a two-story building to begin with, but the family lived upstairs to begin with, and then after they grew, Bahia managed the ready-to-wear department, which was on the second floor. So, and she stayed as manager of that floor for a long time. And then as I grew up, you know, we had a freight elevator in that building, and I was an elevator operator when I was 12 years old. But the whole family worked there, and of course we had other people that worked there too. But as time went on, when I came back out of service, my daddy had bought the building next door. And at that time, Teeter's grocery store, that's where Teeter was. Excuse me, A&P. A&P store was first. And then when when A&P moved up to where the garden party is now, what did you going to say?
Let me have that paper.
This one.
Thank you.
I don't know what I do with it. Anyway, I'm glad you got it.
Go ahead. You were talking about A&P moving up on North Main Street.
They moved down up to a larger location. The garden party's in that space now. So my daddy was talking to Willis and says, you know, you've been the backbone of this business. Why don't you just stay here and open your own store? And Sylvia, his wife, sat there and cried. Said, we'll lose every penny we got and everything. Well, Dad says if you don't make it, you don't owe any rent. That kind of thing. And so he put them in business. And I can remember, this was my dad had died in 71. This was about 1968 or 69. We were sitting back there in the men's department. Willis was in the store. And he made some comment. Said, you know, Mr. Side says, you know, if I lived the first of the year, says my stock in the record will be worth $2 million. But anyway, of course, the rest is history. You know, from there, he moved down to the corner of McCullough and Broad Street. And then Mr. Young White sort of joined in with him, and they opened their first Teeter store out in Boca City, just outside of Lincoln. That was their first one. And then they opened another one. When he got 5 stores, Young White was put him in business and building all that. He merged with the Harris grocery chain, had 5 stores in Charlotte. And of course, ever since then, it just kept on going. They were great grocery people. Anyway, none of the Teeters in the business anymore. The boys are out and retired. And what else?
Mitchell, let me ask you a different question. The neighborhood where you are here, the golf course, tell us a little bit about how that used to be part of Mooresville Mills.
Well, this part, the mill village stopped about 2 blocks this side of Broad Street. The mill company owned the ballpark. Of course, they used to sponsor the Class D League, the Moors. I mean, that was a good program that they had. The mill company ran that program. But the mill, this was, what's his name? Mill. This was the Mills's farm. You remember J.P. Mill's grocery store? Everybody, that's the building on the corner where the church wanted to buy on the corner of of Center and Broad, and the couple people didn't want to tear it down and raise so much sand. The church decided they weren't going to buy it because they didn't want to. Just like the Moore house on the corner of Center and Academy, John White Moore's house.
Yeah.
They wanted to buy that, and Opal, Pam Westmoreland lived across the street. You're not going to tear that house down. So they didn't buy that. They just wanted it for parking. But anyway, lost my train of thought.
You're talking about this
The
was
land.
Hill's farm, and
Oh yeah, this was a farm, and when you got past one block beyond the ballpark, it was a dirt road, and it was fine. It's always down here. Well, the mill company, on the left side, the mill company had a big picnic ground up there. I guess you remember that. But that was all. This was all farmland out in here. Well, right after the war, the mill company, I believe they built the golf course in, didn't they? It was right before it built. And then they built, Gordon Masson and the Masson folks needed houses, so they opened Lawrence Avenue and Pinewood Circle, and Gordon built that big two-story house over there that is now what it was Dr. Shoulders for a long time, and it's now, I know him, I can't think of his name anyway, who bought it, live in it now. So, and people bought lots down here. These lots went for, I think, $900 a lot if you worked for the mill. If you didn't, it was $2,000.
what time frame are we talking about?
This was in the 40s and 50s.
Okay.
It's right after the war. And I remember I tried to buy lots on the east side of town to build a house on it. I had a place picked out on the extension of Cedar Street, but they wouldn't sell me the lot back of me. John Beam and them had that property over there developed. And I couldn't control the erosion. And so I did it. So finally Bill Rader, they went out of church, and they built a house across the street over here, and they were pushing the lots, and Kenneth Masson had built right there, the house that Rufus Dalton bought, and enlarged it. So I bought these two lots here. And then when Wigflass built his house, he built right on his line. There was still a lot in between us, but I knew I was going to have that lot, so I built off Center. I got a short side yard here, and I have a lot of side yard on that side. But eventually the mill company sold it to us, and my neighbor wanted it, and he got so mad at me, so I said, you can have it. But anyway, I didn't want it.
What was the golf course here when you built your house?
I think the golf course had been built, yeah.
Because it's unusual to be a public a golf course that's owned by the town. That's very
Well,
unique.
what happened? The mill company leased it. They didn't want to keep running it. You know, when Burlington had it, they just didn't want to run it. So they leased it to Jim McMara, Leighton Horton, a group of people, Avery Craven, about 6 or 8 people leased it, and they had their own, they ran it themselves. And of course every year they'd take a trip, go to the beach and play golf from the profits. So anyway, then that finally, I don't know what happened, but But anyway, it was, the mill company gave it to the town, I think is what it was. The mill company gave it to the town. So, and then after that, Joe Knox started prodding Tom Brim Williams' grandson, Tommy Templeton, was a doctor in Statesville, about some property out there, and I think Jim Martin was governor then. He helped us get some kind of grant money too, and so we bought the property to build the extra 9 holes, and that's when that was added. Now, of course, the pressure's on the town now to either make it pay for itself or do something with it. So we're in the process now of evaluating whether we're going to sublet, or whether we're going to cut back, or whether we're going to put in the recreation department and sponsor it. And of course, I think the town ought to keep it.
That brings me to another question, Mitchell. You are going off the town board as of next week, I believe.
Next Tuesday.
And so, would you tell us about some of the experiences that you have had? How long were you a member of the town board, and some of the changes that you have seen in Mooresville during your time on the town board?
Okay, let me precede that with a comment. I was in politics about 45 years ago. And after that season was over, I regretted every minute I was in it, and never participated in two parties after that. So when Gene Brown moved out of Ward 4, he had to resign from the board, so they left a vacancy on the board. So I was approached by the folks at City Hall, wondering if I'd be willing to fill out his unexpired term. I was in politics. I don't know whether I want to get back in or not. And Joe Knox says, well, Mitchell says, this is nonpartisan. I said, well, let me think about it. So 6 weeks later, he calls me the third time. He says, what do you thought? So I didn't know what to say. So I turned to Dolores. I want to let her make the decision. I said, Dolores, what do you think I ought to do? She says, well, Mitch, so you do it anyway, go ahead. So I did that, and I ran for re-election, and I went for 2 more terms. So I'm spending 9 years there. And I probably would go another term, but I've been delaying some surgery that I need to do, and it's going to put me out of commission for several months, building on my right shoulder. And so I thought, if I don't do it now, I just might as well forget it. Plus the fact that the council job has got to be a real aggravation. And you know, at one time when we got on the board, it took an hour a month at a meeting. Occasionally you had a committee meeting. Now, you do more than that every week. It's how people hold a job and fill that position now, I don't know. It takes a lot of time because you have so many regulations you got to keep up with. We forever have to revise and change. And when you do that, you're talking about a volume of stuff. You got to read it all because a word in there might be wrong sometime, and somebody will check it a couple years down the road. Why did you get by with that? You know, that kind of. So it's a very demanding position, a lot bigger than you think. But I've enjoyed being on there. I think I had no idea that how municipal things operated. Of course, I used to running a business, and you try to operate on a budget, and you have to do things ahead of time. And if you don't, you get inundated and so forth. Well, that's a different situation. We had a person that had good vision in Joe Knox, and he had good vision for our town, and he projected our town well. But then, listen, I don't know whether I want to put this on the record or not. Can we cut this off? Answer your question, by the way?
Yes. Mitchell, I remember trading at your store. My whole family did, but basically you ran the men's side and Madeline the other side, and you had the scouts upstairs. I remember very well your dad lots of times would be having a paper from the old country, looking at it and reading it. I'm going to make a comment about scouts. As you mentioned, I grew up in your scout troop, was one of your scouts. We always kind of hate or dreaded it when your dad was going to be at the Court of Honor or the Board of Review because he asked so many questions. And that's one of those things in retrospect, you look back at it and say, well, boy, you know, he kept us honest. He made us work. He made us do it right. But I always remember that about Si at night.
You know how the Board of Review was established?
No.
Well, we had too many examiners who were nice people who wouldn't take the time. Oh, you're good, you know, and I asked a couple of questions. In some cases, we've had them, oh, you're a good guy, and they signed the blank. Well, they'd come up before the board and so forth. If anybody got asked a question, they found out they weren't doing their work. I mean, they weren't learning anything. It doesn't benefit a boy to give him an award and they haven't learned anything from it. That's the whole idea, is to get them to learn something in the process. So that's why the board reviews had to be set up, who check them before you go to court, before you go to the Court of Honor. So that was the cause of that. But anyway, yeah, my daddy. When my daddy died, Chip Stonetreet wrote an article in the Tribune. You remember reading that article? I thought it was a classic. I kept it. It was. Leave it. I'm not going to let. I'm not going to get the message. It's probably the same person. No, that was Dr. Forrest calling her for confirming the appointment.
Oh, do you have anything else that you, Al, you got any more questions?
Let me ask one other question and see if you comment.
You can talk about my daddy reading the Lebanese paper. He did that to keep his.
You have reached 663-189.
I must have done something. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
He would take those papers and then just keep, just to stay acclimated in the language and so forth. But I know growing up, I was so embarrassed when they talked Lebanese in front of my kids, my friends who come to the house. My parents wanted us to learn the language, and we were too dumb to appreciate that, I regret something. I can understand Arabic, but I don't speak it. I mean, I understand a lot of it. But I ought to be able to speak some of it, but I just can't get it together. But when I go abroad or someplace and run to these piers and trying quadlingual, speak several languages, I feel so insignificant when I can't speak anything but English. And it's gotten global. We got. I regret now very much that I didn't appreciate my parents doing that. But we could have learned another language, and I could have been fluent in 2 languages, and maybe a third one if I had done the second one. I probably want another one. So,
You mentioned other languages. We talked a little bit about starting at the Catholic Church here. I remember there were a couple of Jewish families. As you're growing up in Mooresville, did everything meld together pretty well, or were you aware of any prejudices or that sort of thing?
When we were small, I got called Jew baby millions of times. We had a couple of guys lived on the street behind us that picked on us all the time. And I remember the first day of class, Mrs. McKnight, Tom McKnight's mother was my first grade teacher. And the first day of school, this little guy made some joke to me about, I don't know, I didn't like what he said anyway, it had something to be Jew baby. And I hauled off and gave him a conk. I almost broke his nose, I hit him so hard. And Miss McKnight got a hold of me, she stretched my hand out, took that ruler and almost knocked my hand off, And when I got home, I got it doubly. So we were told that if that ever happened again, just go off and leave. And we had a lot of that to begin with. We paid our dues, I'll tell you how, growing up. But I tell you, the older I get, the more I appreciate my daddy and my grandfather. I mean, I can't imagine leaving a country and a family and not even able to speak a word of English and going to another country. You've got to be gutsy to do something like that. I thank my lucky stars to be in time that we are here.
Mooresville has certainly benefited by the Macks.
Well,
coming to this area.
That was the attitude of the family. I mean, they all said, if you can't make the place a little bit better than it was when you're here, you have no right to be here. I mean, that was the philosophy.
They did a good job of teaching you that, you and the rest of your cousins.
It took a generation, but it's right fun. I begin to feel like a blue blood person now.
Good. Well, when you consider what the Mack family has done for Mooresville, you have every right to feel that way, truthfully, and because you're from your grandfather and your father, and you have always been very, very active in our community, contributed as much as you could, and for that we appreciate. And especially we appreciate your allowing us to interview you today, Mitchell. Thank you so much.
Well, to Academy, and turned south on Academy, and went to Matella, and back to Broad Street. That was the only block away from Main Street that was paved. Even Church Street was not paved, and all the rest of the streets. If you think about it, when you got off of Main Street, that was the only block in town that was paved. Okay, tell me you're ready.
All right, yeah, Mitchell, will you tell us about me?
I recall when Lieutenant Cheryl Williams, Miss Clay Williams, took down her house, which is on the corner of South Main and Catawba Avenue, and built that library and just gave it to the town. Vargas built it, and gave that no strings attached. And even after that, like I said, when our folks, we used to, Dr. Taylor would send all his patients for major medical work always to Baptist Hospital. We sent them with Charlotte. And if anybody from Moore was ever in that hospital over there, they got flower arrangements. And I know my daddy got personal visits from her too. So I mean, she was a special person. She was tremendous. Of course, another big day I mentioned is when James Farley, Postmaster General, was in Moorville to dedicate the new post office, which is now the school headquarters. You know, that was a big occasion. They had bleachers out in the street in front of the building.
And the school children, how did they participate?
We didn't have a band or anything there, but I don't remember whether we had a group to sing or not. But something went on with the students because we got out of school to go to see it.
What year are you talking about, more or less?
30, late 30s, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the date. But what else was I going to say? Popped into my mind that should be mentioned. Let me turn this off a minute until I think. Something was in my mind and it went right back out as fast as it came in.
Yeah, mine does that all the time.
That was good.
It's so